the listeners have asked a couple of questions. Is there connections between parasites and oxalates and also chronic inflammatory response syndrome and oxalates? I say that all to say is that I'm super interested to hear what your thoughts are on this, Monique.
What I want to say to start out with is I do think because oxalate impacts mast cells and because oxalate drives inflammation and a, a kind of inflammation that the immune system is not kind of ready for, which is this sterile, non-related to infection, not necessarily true injury kind of inflammation. So you can have low-grade inflammation that's kind of going on all the time, which you may not actually be fully aware of because it may show up as low energy or it may show up as other things. Right. And that kind of has the immune system chasing its own tail. Is the immune system's job, its raison d'etre, is that when there's inflammation, it has to come to the plate. It's the one that deals with injury, infection, those kinds of things. Well, if you've got this low-grade inflammation and it's happening all throughout the body, and then a parasite wanders along, will your immune system deal with it the way it normally would? Well, maybe not. And if it's chasing its own tail, it's not then doing the job you want it to do. So what I remember from being on a high oxalate diet is that I seemed to have no immune resilience. I'd get a cold. Everybody else in the family would be done in 5 days. And 4 weeks later, I'd be still trying to fight the thing off. But if your immune system is otherwise distracted over here and it's running around after oxalate-related inflammation, maybe it's not allocating the resources to the problem that you've got, which is new because it's stretched too thin. And like when it comes to then this idea of a chronic inflammatory response, makes perfect sense to me that you've got oxalate, which is known to be a driver of inflammation. And if you're taking in however much oxalate you're taking in, but let's say 1,000 milligrams, you and I can laugh over that because that's nothing. But let's say you're taking in that much a day, that's a pretty significant amount of oxalate. That could be driving pretty constant inflammation. Are your cells then going to be throwing up a white flag all the time saying, there's a problem here? Yeah, I think they could be. And I think there's another condition that I've heard referred to as in cell danger response, and then mast cell and histamine intolerance. I suspect a lot of these things are potentially related to each other and could potentially be related to the fact that we have, I'm going to say, too many kinds of chemical exposures in modern life. Oxalate being one that we're not really paying attention to, but there's lots of other ones out there as well. And if they're all kind of driving an inflammatory response, your system can absolutely be stuck in a loop like a hamster on a wheel. And oxalate's not just a biochemical toxin, it is also a physical irritant, especially if you've got it in its insoluble form. So, kinds of stuff can be going on there. I really honestly, the more I work with people who have mast cell, or they tell me they have cell danger response, or they tell me they have SIRS, or they tell me they have histamine intolerance, the more I notice the similarities between all these things. And, people who have chronic Lyme or they have other kinds of chronic infections, I have actually had clients who got to the other side of Lyme, tested negative. I have had clients who got to the other side of other kinds of chronic infections because once we got this chronic inflammation out of the way, then their immune system went, oh, look over there, there's an actual bad guy. And then it goes and does its job, right? So I do think there's a lot of potential hopefulness in being able to move oxalate out of the way. It's a bit of a bear while you're trying to get it out, as you and I both know.
When I look around and think about what you're saying, Monique, about how my immune system has recovered so well because I had replicating Epstein-Barr virus, chronic
Yep.
EBV,
Yep.
I had a bacterial infection, I had a parasitic infection, I
Yep.
definitely had oxalate overload. I mean, ticking in all the box. And now, how I've repaired my gut, as I talked about, and my immune system, as you so correctly said, once it recognizes something, it can then go after the correct thing. and not be on high alert all the time. I have people around me this flu and cold season dropping like flies, and I'm over here like, yeah, baby, my immune system's doing its job for, it's finally going, thank you, thank you. We can do what
Yeah.
we're meant to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like that's what I notice is that I have a lot better immune resilience. Although, gosh, you put yourself under enough stress, you can still be dropped like an animal with a dart gun. But occasionally, I guess the immune system needs a bit of a workout.